I remember the first time I've seen the true face of evil. It was a cold, cloudy day, sometime in the middle of autumn. We were looking down upon the northern sea from the top of a cliff, watching the dark waves crashing against the rocks tirelessly, with unrelenting force. Who knows how long the sea had been trashing its foamy hands against the land? How many centuries did it take for this pearly-eyed mistress to form such an imposing landmark? Or how many lives could have been lost to her deadly yet strangely alluring depths? We might never know. The only thing I was certain of was that in that somber moment I felt inspired to write the first of my poems, and how I wanted to dedicate it to the sea. Then Kalervo fell on his knees and greeted the waves with a stream of vomit. "There, there," said Laurits in a gentle voice, patting the giant's back as if he was a child. "Let it all out, big boy. It's better outside than inside. Would it kill you too, to stop drinking? Just for one day? We are going to meet Duke Juho of Prieten, for God's sake." Now, a member of this dysfunctional family, I scolded them like how an older brother would scold his younger siblings, despite the fact that there was around 20 years between me and my supposed Grand Master. You must know, dear reader, that my anger was justified, for the Duke of Prieten was an important figure during the times of my youth. He had power second only to the king, and enough prestige to stop my family's rivals from completely destroying us. If we could earn his patronage, then maybe, just maybe, I could have elevated the Alehouse Knights from roaming mercenaries into becoming part of his retinue. Or better yet, I could have a chance to leave these roaming mercenaries behind. Laurits, my boy, you know how dangerous these rural areas can be, and we simply don't have the time to find clean sources of water. I mean, that's... You know what? All right, sure, whatever. But that doesn't mean you should drink each tavern dry. Yes, it does. At that point, I was almost done with arguing for the virtues of absenting from drinking. It was nothing but seething rage that kept me getting into arguments like these, although part of me seemed to enjoy these fruitless endeavors. As much as I hated to admit it, Laurits was kind of fucking funny. Besides, you have been with us for half a year. You should have grown accustomed to our customs. Like when I first arrived to your lands, I could barely tolerate your cuisine. The lack of fish concerned me greatly. Anyways, my point is that I have been eating nothing but blood sausages and rye bread ever since. What do you say to that? Okay. I nodded, hoping that me not showing any interest in his speech would bring an end to the conversation. Now, with that out of the way, lead us to the meeting spot. He waved towards the nearby road, and we were back on our journey. I had been elected to lead my fellow warriors through the wilderness, for I visited these parts plenty of times during my childhood. We were east of Lord Juho's seat of power, just half an hour away from our destination, the quiet fishing village of Lukla. The trip there was uneventful, but not forgettable. We strolled across a forest of reds, yellows, and browns, a cavalcade of colors just as, if not more, vibrant than the most cheerful days of spring. The smell of wet soil mixed with a distinct scent of partly decaying leaves lingered in the air, which for me always brought back childhood memories. I played a lot outside when I was a child, so the low angle of the sun alongside the changing of leaves always reminded me of jumping around in the howling winds and sipping on hot tea inside my family's keep. By the time we reached our destination, there was no trace of this earthly beauty. Grey clouds had enveloped the sky, barren trees surrounded us from all directions, and worst of all, Lukla was in ruin. The houses of this once quiet hamlet had been tarnished by fires, their walls painted by blood, and occasionally, with their thatched roofs collapsed or on the ground. Some laid beyond repair, collapsed into a pile of material waiting to be salvaged. Others appeared to be fine at first glance, but had large holes which were clearly not made by man. Worst of all, there was absolutely no sign of the inhabitants, for the only people we found were soldiers carrying the colours of Juho, standing idly in the middle of the settlement. We approached them in silence. None of us could really say anything about the sorrowful scene, as in our hearts we were all mourning. Even the always stoic Kalervo seemed affected. I knew that men like him must have done many similar deeds over the centuries. But this time, the smell of death carried an inhuman scent. "Hail, fellow warriors! You must be the men of Juho of Preeton," I said when we got near. "Aye," came the answer right after. "Great! Could you brave fellows lead us to your lord by any chance?" "Nah. He's down south fighting them Kargota horsemen. They have been hired by his brother to take over his realm. So it's just us, his sergeants." "Oh my, I am sorry to hear that," I muttered. "It's fine. Not like those nomads can do more than burn down a couple villages," he said, while holding back the urge to yawn. "Speaking of burned villages," I said, after a few seconds of silence, What happened here?" "Well, there isn't too much to it. Place got put to the torch, but strangely enough, no valuables were stolen." I pushed my elbow into Oroitz's side right there and then, wondering if he had ever encountered similar cases throughout his travels. "What do you think of that, Oroitz?" I asked him. "What?" Sorry, I wasn't listening. This old guy had all my attention. He explained before pointing his armored finger towards an elderly fellow who stood just a few steps away from the gathering soldiers. He wore plain clothes of brown and grey, carrying nothing but the branch of a birch tree, which he used as a walking stick. He was visibly shocked as well, and in bad shape, so it was clear as day that he was no sorcerer, but a humble peasant past his prime. "Oh, yeah. What's his deal?" I inquired, to which the old man stepped forth and lowered his head in sorrow. "Welcome to Lukla, Sir Knights. Or at least, what's left of it. I was the village elder, and as far as I can tell, the sole survivor of the attack which struck us 4 days ago. It was a quiet autumn night. We were all sleeping, hoping to get some rest before heading out to the sea for fish, when we were attacked with such swiftness that not even your presence would have made a difference. We had sent some men to aid our lord, you see, so our militia was understaffed and outnumbered. And worst of all, the enemy were devils, tall, shriveled-up beings, tearing men apart, aided by clawed, worm-like beings. Truly, it was a terrible, terrible night," he said. "How did you survive?" asked Oroitz while stepping forward, his voice filled with determination. He did not seem to be affected by the elder's tale. In fact, I could sense some doubt behind his words. Well, good sir. My house is right here on the border of our little village, opposite to the direction the attack came from, and it was only thanks to my grandson's sacrifice that I managed to run away, to warn our lord, Juho," explained the old man. "With all due respect," began Oroitz, "I think you are a liar. Am I really to believe that creatures moving as fast as lighting did not catch up to you, a man with a lame leg?" In that moment, everything became clear, as I realized how reluctant was the old man when it came to looking into our eyes, or how he was fidgeting the end of his stick the whole time. These were clear signs of lying. "You got me?" sighed the village elder. "But you must know, I am not lying for the reasons you think. I played no part in the destruction of my people, at least not directly. "Go on," said Laurits menacingly. "Our homes hide a dark secret. For many generations, we have been secret worshippers of the gods of our ancestors, specifically the master of war and the seas, Iku-Tursu. I remember how I loudly gasped upon hearing those words, how Kaltenborn and I looked at each other, petrified to learn the truth behind the massacre. You see, dear reader, Iku-Tursu is the member of the ancient Sankarian pantheon, an evil, malevolent sea monster who offered wealth and power to those foolish enough to swear loyalty to him. He was quickly abandoned once the creator's cult made a comeback, and for good reasons, for he is one of the few deities which accepted human sacrifice as a valid form of offering. Even among heathens, he is a controversial figure, although I cannot tell you more, for his kind is easy to attract with words. We have been providing him with sacrifices each morning," he continued. "Each morning we have given him the first batch of fish to be caught, among other petty things. In return, he protected us from the beasts of the forests and provided us with food for the winters. I tried to warn the others that we must purge the evil which lurks under our feet, but they refused to listen. It wasn't until last week, when Tursus asked for a human sacrifice, that my kin decided to put a halt to the rituals. Then, a few days later, his minions attacked us. The sergeant we spoke to, just moments before, spat on the ground and crossed his arms. You're lucky that I'm not bestowed with the powers to condemn you, old man. If it were up to me, you'd have been put to the sword already," he said. "I understand," replied the village elder as he lowered his head in shame. "What about your escape? Was that part true? Did your grandson really buy you time?" I asked. Part of me felt bad for the old man, and hoped that his kin's heroic deeds managed to save his family's honor in the end. "No, I am unsure of his fate. I was only spared because one of those things recognized me," came the shocking reply. "You see, my sister, may the Creator forgive her soul, had offered herself to the creatures, back when I was just a small lad. In return, I was healed from a very terrible cold, which had threatened my life." "I've heard enough," declared Laurits. "Lead us to the source of this evil, if there is one, and you may redeem yourself." He then turned towards me, and in a serious tone gave me his first proper advice. "Always be on the lookout for corruption, Laurits. You can never know how far its roots have reached on this world." We departed from our meeting spot soon after. It turned out that the village elder did know the lair of Tursus's minions, and it sent shivers down my spine. These creatures were hiding in a cave somewhere near the sea, where the waves crash into the cliffs, the fiercest. There were 7 of us in total, so this time the Alehouse Knights were supported by 4 brave souls, who were just as clueless about the horrors of the underworld as I was. These men wore varying levels of protection, from male hauberks to simple gambesons, wielding spears or hunting swords, with the exception of the sergeant, who wielded an axe. They were a quiet bunch, very focused on their job. Meanwhile, on the other side of the coin was Kaltenborn, equipped with his trusty battle axe, and Laurits, still armed with his ornate short sword. I was still armed with an arming sword back then, but I did take a wooden shield from our previous job, when we had to kill another ragtag group of bandits. The additional form of protection calmed my nerves a bit, although the lack of a battle mage made me concerned. The power of even a single sorcerer had the chance to turn the tide of battle in our favor, and after hearing the old man's tales, I felt like we were a bit unprepared for the task. But alas, Juho needed men elsewhere. So there we were, standing in front of the moors of oblivion. The air stung due to the saltiness of the sea, made worse by the moisture which covered all of us. It was like standing at the edge of the world. Our only protection against the tide was a sturdy half-circle of rocks, which acted as barriers against the relentless tide of waves. But before we could venture into the underworld, the old man spoke again, and to me specifically. "One more thing, Sir Knight," he said with pleading eyes. "If you were to find my sister's remains, or something that belonged to her, could you bring them back for me? She always wore a small seashell as a necklace, and seeing it again after all those years would soothe my soul." I admit I was left speechless upon hearing his pleas. He was a guilty man, a heathen who allowed evil to enter his home, someone who was working with the forces lurking within the shadows. Yet in that moment, I saw none of this. No, before me was a frail old man searching for salvation. The code of chivalry could not allow me to cast the woes of the weak aside, so I nodded and smiled. "Very well, you have my word." I could see a spark of hope lit up in his tired eyes, so when we waved goodbye, I entered the cave with a clean conscience, and down we went, with faith and steel. We descended, unsure if we even had a chance against the horrors lurking ahead. Minutes felt twice as long in those god-forsaken tunnels. We could only rely on the fickle fire of our torches for light, and even then, we could barely see past a few feet around us, due to conditions well beyond our control. After a certain point, when there was no trace of the sun's weakened light left, a vague white mist engulfed our surroundings. Worst yet was the cold. Oh, that creeping, indescribable cold. It bit into us worse than the most frigid days of winter. Yet our bodies refused to go numb or shiver, letting us suffer a pain which wasn't meant to be felt by man. The first part of our expedition was terrific indeed, although none of these abnormalities threatened our lives directly. One member of our group, a young fellow with no mail over his gambeson, frequently expressed his concerns directly to us, the Alehouse Knights. "I've never been part of anything like this before, you know. Be bandits are one thing, but I only heard tales about these things," he said one time. Of course, his sergeant was quick to shut him up with threats and such, but otherwise, we moved through the expanding tunnel in silence. That was until we arrived into the first chamber. It was spacious, so spacious in fact, that 100 men could easily stand shoulder to shoulder inside. At first, I thought this was the spawning pit of the nightmarish creatures we heard about, but as we got to the center of the room, we noticed it was actually an intersection connecting 3 tunnels in total. First, there was the path we had arrived from. Then, there was a narrower one, to our right, slightly elevated, and still shrouded in darkness. Lastly, there was the road to our left, just slightly wider than where we come from. It would have been another large hole under the soil, if it wasn't for the sights it held. The chamber wasn't completely dark, you see. It was bathed in a faint, dark blue light, the source of which turned out to be something I had never seen before, and have never witnessed since then. Mold had grown over the walls, reaching upward to the rocky ceiling in erratic patterns. These patches of organic matter had tiny spots of brighter blue on the surface, which also let out a small, barely noticeable hum. "Mold that sings! Now I've seen it all," shouted Laurits, his voice echoing between the wet stone walls. "Let's not stay here for long." "Please, this noise is giving me goosebumps," I said. I am not too sure about the exact details of the events which followed. Whether we spoke more or not, I cannot recall, or better yet, suppressed. For the only thing I still remember from that fateful moment was the screams of that young soldier from before. In an instant, we turned to face our companions, coming face to face with a living, breathing nightmare. Standing before us was a figure vaguely in the shape of a starved man, observing us with its 4 white, inhuman eyes. They were like slits filled with silver, a striking contrast compared to its pitch-black leathery skin, covering its elongated limbs and razor-sharp tail. 4 straight horns decorated its long, arrowhead-shaped head, while a dark blue tongue licked its many needle-like teeth. Then it smiled. By the love of the Creator, I swear that it smiled. What sin have I committed? What incursion have I done to enrage the cosmos? What reason was there for the heavens to curse me with gaining the attention of none other than the devilish herald of Iku-Tursu? As the thing let out a maddening guttural screech, I noticed the sergeant laying before its clawed feet, throat torn open and bleeding profusely. It brings me great shame to say this, but I froze in that pivotal moment. The first encounter with the forces of disorder, the gored soldier, and the sight of more of those creatures coming out of the shadows filled me with fear. So when it lunged at me, I stood there, motionless. It was only thanks to Kalavo's quick thinking and mighty axe that I am still alive. The blow took the beast's head off, signaling the start of the battle. Seeing it die woke me up, and I quickly got to work, fighting side by side with my fellow Alehouse Knights. There was much to hack and slash, as alongside the horned devils, we were surrounded by worm-like beings with stocky limbs, dark purple carapaces, and razor-sharp jaws. These were much smaller than us, and easier to dispose as well. A few blows from my arming sword ended them easily, as they were simple creatures, and always lunged at us before attempting to tear us apart with their wicked teeth. I quickly got used to the rhythm of blocking the initial blow, then stabbing their unarmored sides, or, in some rarer cases, disemboweling them while they were still in the air. We were swarmed by waves upon waves of black flesh, giving us little time for breathers, although sometimes I had enough time to observe my comrades. Kaltervo was crushing the worm things like they were nothing, tearing many apart with just a single swing, covering the cavern's floor with otherworldly gore. A few horned things dared to enter his vicinity and met a similar fate, while the rest were smart enough to avoid him like the plague. This was the first time I have truly seen him unleash the beast which dwelled within Kaltervo. The first time I bore witness to the power of a Sunkarian wildman. Meanwhile, on my other side, Laurits fought in his usual style, like a graceful swan with the bite of a wasp. He was still holding a torch in his other hand, which he used as an improvised weapon from time to time. Strangely enough, the horned creatures wouldn't approach him either. In fact, I could see a few sitting on some rocks nearby, observing us with those remorseless eyes of theirs, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. As for how the Duke's men have fared, I am not too sure. We were separated, divided, as to make our party easier to destroy. Yet I could hear the screams of men from afar, which by my guess was theirs. Eventually, the battle ended as quickly as it had begun. The worm things stopped appearing, and the remaining devils disappeared into the darkness. The sound of flesh being cut apart was now replaced by our panting and the ominous hum of the mold. We prepared ourselves to meet the next horde head-on, but lowered our guard once we realized we were alone once again. And alone the three of us were. For once we had shaken off our battle frenzy. We found the corpses of Juho's men, all torn apart except for the young soldier. His body was missing, although a trail of blood gave me hope that he could still be saved. "Come, this way. It might not be too late," I told the others before making an attempt at rushing forward. I would have certainly disappeared into the tunnels if it wasn't for Laurits, who quickly grabbed me by my surcoat and yanked me aside. "Laurits! Listen to me, Laurits," he said sternly, to which I started stuttering, unable to formulate a proper reply. "Can you continue?" he asked. "We must not," I began, only to be stopped by Laurits again. I said, "Can you continue?" His voice now carried a hint of concern, like that of a father's, making me realize what he was really trying to say. The encounter had left me shocked, and it was clear as day that I'd taken a blow to my sanity. My eyes kept darting in all directions, while my breath was heavy and filled with terror. Yes, I can. I'm just a bit shaken, that's all," I told him. I could not look him in the eyes, for I must admit I was embarrassed to be frightened. I, who is supposed to be the bulwark against the darkness, was scared. Fortunately, Laurits was an understanding man. "Good. But if you ever feel like you are at your limit, tell me, and we'll turn back. No one expects us to defeat these things in one go. Believe me, many had tried. After that, we took a few minutes of rest before we began to follow the trail of blood I had mentioned before. It led directly through the narrow tunnel to the right and into the unknown. We were lucky that no creature decided to attack us as we traversed through it. So tight was that corridor that we could barely move our hands. Poor Kalervo even got stuck a few times, forcing us to wait until he freed himself. After minutes spent struggling between the rocks, the air turned warm. The frigid atmosphere was replaced by a damp one, while the smell of rock and stone was switched out for the scent of rotten meat. Later on, right after Kalervo got unstuck for the second time, we could see the end of the tunnel, bathed in the light of torches, alongside the sound of what appeared to be a gigantic bellow being used. I was the last one to enter the final chamber, but part of me wishes that I had never set foot into that accursed palace of demons. Before us was a great hall, dug out by beings long forgotten, a home of black devils and the broken black stone of ancient masonry. Lit by eternal torchlight, the underworld's minions gathered around the center of the room, eagerly waiting to see our reactions to the horrid sight which they had surrounded. Creator, forgive me, but I must write down the truth. In the middle was none other but a gigantic breathing maw, with teeth the size of a full-grown man. The crimson-colored flesh twitched, its veins bulged, and its saliva dripped like any other being's. But all who reads these pages must know that whatever thing it was a part of did not come from our world. The urge to scream and to run away grew. By each second I had spent staring at the abomination, every inch of my body was telling me to escape the caverns, and it was only thanks to a single sudden thought that I decided to stay. I remembered the sight of the ruined village, the desperation within the village elder's eyes, and the sorrowful tale of his sister's demise. In that frightening moment, I remembered that I wasn't fighting for silver, or to earn the Duke's favor, but because I have sworn to protect those who could not fight for themselves. "Look! Support beams!" shouted Laurits, while pointing his sword to the right. Indeed, there were wooden beams near the walls, most likely done by the villagers out of debt for the monsters they had worshipped. They showed clear signs of aging, which questioned the integrity of not only the entire construction, but the ground it was holding as well. "Kalervo, do you think your axe could bring it down?" I asked him, thanks to a sudden spark of ingenuity. He gave it a few seconds of though, after which he grinned at me while giving a nod. "We'll cover you, brother. Let those rocks loose." Great thinking, Laurits. Now, Knights of the Alehouse, to arms. As soon as the order was given, we shouted our battle cries and charged forward. We didn't care whether we had the odds or not, as our only concern was the defeat of our inhuman foes. It was there that I had the misfortune of fighting those horned things for the first time, although they were few in numbers by then. They were an elusive foe, quick to dodge and always ready to jump out of harm's way. Many attempts were made at my life, both by their claws and their tails, which ended in a hooked blade-like part. My shield received many blows by both, to the point that it began to crumble. I am sure that the Creator had glanced at me that day, for my mail managed to soften the few blows which I could not block, and I managed to walk out of the whole ordeal with nothing more but a couple of mean bruises. 2 creatures fell under my blade. One I gutted, as it made attempt at reaching past my shield with its long, bony hand, hoping to tear the skin off of my unprotected face. The second was harder to bring down. While its mates kept their distance, it sneaked behind my back, but wasn't quick enough to strike me down before I noticed him. As such, I quickly turned around and swung, only for my sword to bounce off of its thick ribs. Next thing I knew, it grabbed me by my throat and was mere seconds away from impaling my eyes out with its claws. My quick thinking saved my life once again, as I swiftly hit the thing in the head using my shield, followed up by slicing its throat open. The rest, while as fearsome as the previous 2, I could not defeat, but fortunately, they could not kill me either. While I could not observe Kalervo directly, Laurits filled me on the details the next day. He told me that our giant made short work of any creature which stood between him and the support pillars, which he hacked into pieces without a moment's notice. A few horned devils tried to stop him. One even managed to scar his right arm, but those were quickly disposed of. As we were tiring ourselves out, he burrowed his axe into the wood, which as it turned out was covered with the effluvial grime that the moor had secreted over the years. It was no surprise then that he managed to destroy the pillar in just a couple of minutes. While it might have been a few minutes, to us it was a torturous dance, which seemed to last thrice its actual length. I remember standing back to back with Laurits, surrounded by the devils, when the first rock began to fall. It broke one of the moor's teeth in, to which it let out a roar so frightening, even its servants froze in fear. Then came another rock from above, then another, crashing not only into the jaws of the colossal creature, but into other areas of the chamber as well. Suffice to say, we didn't need to wait for any further orders from Laurits. We made a mad dash towards the exit, knocking or slashing the devils aside, for even they were afraid of the cold embrace of death. Sometimes, when I must enter closed spaces, I think back of our escape through that narrow tunnel, and I can still hear the dying thing roaring behind my back. Ultimately, That's my last memory of my first venture underground. I must have been so afraid the way back, due to the sights I have seen alongside the fear of being crushed, that my mind erased those last harrowing moments. The next thing I remember was the three of us, laying on our backs, wheezing and staring into the autumn sun. We went back down just a few days after our first expedition. Purging evil is a work that must not be rushed, so we had to make sure that no trace of Iku-Tursu was left under the village. And just as quickly as they had swarmed Lukla, the beasts disappeared. We found no indication that they were still stalking the caverns, and no sign of the weird moss, only human bones in a chamber which had eluded us during our first descent. Among the skeletons, we found one in a tattered dress, wearing a small seashell around her neck, who we had wrapped in cloth and brought back to the surface. The village elder's sister was then given a proper burial, for it had been decided that she did not offer herself to the creatures out of devotion, but as a way to protect those she had loved. I'm sure not everyone would have given her the same respect, but we did, for all carried the curse of having seen the true face of evil.